Whoa! Thank you for clicking. My name is Alex. This is Gut Check. I'm going to tell you all my least favorite albums of 2022 and my favorite albums of 2022. Let's get right into it. This is part 2 out of a 3-part series. My first part is actually already posted. You should go check that out now. I'm going to be starting right where I left off in the last one. I'm in the B- section, so let's do it. First album we'll be talking about today is 24 Karat Toothache by Post Malone. This is a B- release for me this year. I think this was a really good album. I'm just fucking with you. This album was really disappointing. His other albums are really good. They have a lot of variety and show his plethora of skills that he has. This one just didn't do it. It sounded really same-songy. The song with Doja Cat's really good. That's literally the only memorable moment. But that song with Doja Cat, I actually would say is one of my favorite Post Malone songs and one of my favorite Doja Cat songs. So I would say that's pretty good. B-. If you like Post Malone's sound, check this out. If you don't like it, don't check this out. You will not like it. The next one is going to be I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Terra Vista. This album, it's alright. I gave it a B-. I don't necessarily remember too much about it. It's pretty goddamn mid. A little bit better than Post Malone's. I don't necessarily know what to say past that. The next one's going to be Abstract Matrix by Asylum Effect. This is a B- EP, I believe. I also don't really have too much to say about this. This is like a metal album. I have a feeling once you see the album art, you'll be able to tell them apart and be able to tell kind of what's into it if you know anything about the metal hardcore space. The next one after that is actually an album that it gets a lot of hate from the internet. I put it a little high up, but it actually was originally at the A+, but the more I listened to it, I decided to pipe it down. I might have overhyped it a little bit. This is the album Come Home, The Kids Miss You by Jack Harlow. It's got some really good songs. The flows and the actual variety in the album isn't very well done. I would say it's pretty mediocre in that term. I don't think Jack Harlow has the skill set to necessarily keep an entire album fresh the way he does with specific singles. But the way the album is a little outdated for his kind of goal in the rap community. The way the album is a little outdated, and when it comes to his goal in the rap community, I definitely don't think it's necessarily bad. I don't necessarily think it's his best work either. First Class is really good. The song with Drake, it was really jarring to hear that since Drake has already used the sample used in that song in a different one of Drake's songs. So I don't, it's a little weird, but it's all right. If you like Jack Harlow's kind of style, you'll like this. I like this. The thematic elements of this album when it comes to just him talking about how much he just loves his girlfriend. I think that's the difference in tempo when it comes to that opposed to going to an album where all they're talking about is fucking bitches. So yeah, B-. This next one is Euphoria by Enox. This is a metalcore album. This got pretty good hype online. I do think it's an Architect's core, but it's really well done. They have their own little sort of carve into their world of metalcore, and I think it's done pretty well. B- if you like Architect's core, check this out. Architects, Linkin Park, some Slipknot, throw them all together, you got this band. This next one's going to be Rain City Drive, self-titled. This is the band that's fronted by Matt McAndrews, coming off of their A+ release to Better Days from a few years ago. I absolutely adore that album. This album does not follow up nearly with as strong as material. I think the song Eternity is really good, and the singles are also really good. But the other tracks just seem pretty filler for those singles, which the last album did not give that vibe whatsoever. The last album, it was very, very good. And so to have this one kind of follow up that, it was just a difficult one to follow up with. I am really excited to see their future projects. I think this is a little bit of a misstep in the road, but we'll see what they do. Shout out to Matt McAndrew if any of these Rain City Drive guys are watching, because I love them. And yeah, B- this year, unfortunately. This next one, these are getting into a little bit more of the ones I'm a little bit more familiar with when it comes to terms of just memorizing what they sound like. This next one's going to be Harsh Sounds by Magotsu. Magotsu is a screaming trap metal artist who really pushes into the screaming. He is an excellent vocalist. I mean, this guy, he does some fucking crazy deathcore growls. He does some crazy noises I've never heard any of these other fucking trap metal artists do. If you want to hear some harsh sounds, this is for you. I had this a little bit too hyped because I really like his other work, like Under the Pillow and anything off that EP. I think is really good, but it just didn't necessarily hold up in terms of quality when it comes to comparison. So this is a B minus. The next one is Damnum by Allegiant. This is a very fast, heavy metal project. I did not expect to like this as much as I did, so I gave it a B minus this year. If you like sort of older heavy metal mixed with sort of newer heavy metal, it's kind of somewhere in the middle when it does it quite well as I think it can be done. That's why I think it falls in B minus, because just the actual what they're trying to make isn't necessarily good. Sort of like good artists, bad songs in a way. I don't necessarily know how to explain it. B minus though. Don't necessarily discourage you from checking it out if the way I described it is exactly your thing. The next one is going to be Hell Is In Your Head by Census Fail. Pop punk band for the likes of, Calling All Cars and a ton of other classic emo bangers. This album's actually pretty good. There's a song on it with Connie Scarbosa and a song on it with Spencer Charnas of Ice Nine Kills. Both those songs are really good. There's a few other good tracks on it. I don't necessarily... So this next one is The Hell Is In Your Head by Census Fail. This is a really unique kind of track. I don't necessarily understand too many of the perspectives that this band really has. There's two good songs on here that I really like, which is the Carney Scarbosa feature. The song that is on, she absolutely fucking murders it. And the song that has Spencer Charnas on it, but that's not on the actual album. That was released as a single with Spencer, but the actual album release does not have Spencer on it. For whatever fucking reason. I don't know what happened there, but it's just a weird design choice. This is a B minus. Pop punk legends came in. Little weak, but, they're fucking like 20 years into their career. I don't necessarily expect the best material from them now, but if you like kind of their older sound, you like this for sure. This next one's going to be Bimbo Core by Seeing Queen. This is the first EP she released this year. This is just fun. If you want to hear songs about hating men, go for it. This is sort of like Kesha with breakdowns, which I'm here for. I like Kesha with breakdowns. I don't necessarily think this is the best fucking music I've ever heard in my life, but I definitely think it's a little creative, and I definitely think it's a lot of fun, and I can't really fault that too much. This next one's going to be Dark Sun by Dayseeker. Now, Dayseeker are kind of a surprise for me this year. Dayseeker is a band that I was expecting to release their third A-plus album in a row. But this year, I think Dark Sun kind of fell a little flat. I think their last two albums are A-pluses. This one just kind of feels a little bit more like a Hurtwave project. But I think that's necessarily what their intention was. They wanted to move away from the core a little bit into more of the poppier elements. But I think once they lost that core element, it's kind of fallen slightly flat. I love Waking is Sinking, Dreaming is Rising, and I love Sleep Talk. Those albums are actually phenomenal albums. But this one I think is just good. Not great. B minus for them this year. And now we're moving into our B pluses. Everything here on out is B pluses, and the gatekeeper for B pluses was Pain into Power by Terror. This is a hardcore album EP. They're really short. It's basically breakdown, fuck you, breakdown, everything you love about hardcore, anything you hate about hardcore if you don't like this. But I like it. I don't necessarily love it. I think this was a good spot to put at the B plus to gatekeep it, because this is basically very cookie cutter Terror material. So in order for it to necessarily branch any higher, I think it had to be a little strayed from their normal path. B plus. The next one is a really intense EP called Gather and Mourn by End, split with Cult Leader. Now, the reason this is at B plus is because I think End is remarkable on this, but they're only half this EP. The other half, Cult Leader, I don't think is marvelous. I think they kind of are not very good. So, in order to meet right in the middle of probably what I would say D minus A plus, it lands right in B+. End are insane. Brendan Murphy's songwriting is insane. The riff writing is insane. The lyrics are insane. The voice is insane. And the performance is even crazier than all of that. Solid B+ EP from this year. The next one is A Moment of Silence by Senna. This is also an EP. This I liked, didn't necessarily love it. I would recommend to check it out and form your own opinion. It's a very new artist. The one after that is going to be Keepsake by Sleep at the Helm. Now, this is the very first album I checked out in 2022, so it landed right in the middle at B+. This is a metalcore project. There's a song on it called Outriders. That song is really good. The rest of the album I think is solid, but Outriders. That song's so catchy, so good. Very small metalcore project from, I think, like New England area, maybe Indianapolis somewhere. Really good project, really good bands. I liked this album. This was a B+ this year. This next one is going to be the Empire's Fall EP by Our Last Night. Now, I'm someone who actually loves Our Last Night's original material. I think their album Evolve is really good. That album is really fun, really good. I think they have a lot of good material. I think they're very overhated when it comes to them as a band due to the covers of fucking Disney songs or whatever. I think the original material is solid. The next one is going to be We Chose to Go to the Moon by Rookie Card. Now, this is a very experimental punk EP album. This is from a band I've never listened to. This shit, I don't even know how to describe it. It is really punk, really like punk rock specifically. I guess there's not really a difference, but to me there is. When it comes to this band's sound, it's very experimental. Nothing's like it. I liked this. I don't necessarily remember too much about the actual sound, but I remember listening to this, and I originally put this in A+, but as I re-listened to it throughout the year, I actually kind of came to a conclusion that I didn't like it as much as I initially did. I think this is a very solid B+ project. This next one is going to be Crew D'Amour 2 by Cane Hill. This is an EP they brought to us. This is the second part. Cane Hill, I think, is very hit or miss. I really love their older material, yet their newer material just doesn't hit the same for me. They're a metalcore band, very, very, very similar to like a Slipknot, Linkin Park sound. I like them. Don't necessarily love Cane Hill. I know this band has a lot of fucking fans online. I think they just put out a B+ EP this year. It had a lot of hype, and I went into it, and it just wasn't necessarily there. This next one is one I'm actually really excited to talk about. I haven't seen too many people online in the online space talk about it, so this is New Nostalgia by Dead American. This is the project that Cove Rebar is in now. He is the second vocalist of Seoshin, which was originally founded by Anthony Green. It's really funny because this album art has a Beatle on it, which their iconic album, the Seoshin self-titled, does. So I think that's kind of funny, and it's called New Nostalgia, so I thought that was a little bit of a jab at them. I'm a big fan of this project. This project kind of borders my subjective to objective. I think this is an objectively a B+ album, but I subjectively think it's an A+ album, if that makes any sense. I like the messages. I like Cove as a vocalist. I love him as a person. Little strange, but, you know. But I actually come to realize that this music isn't the best. It's very punk, nothing like what Seoshin sounded like. I hope you check it out. This next one is Almighty Men by the Dahlia Thundering Concept. This is a album that is like a metalcore album that borders deathcore at points. It is very heavy metalcore if you're for fans of like Breakdown of Sanity, Older Parkway Drive, August Burns Red, that more metally side of metalcore without the large choruses. I think this is a solid album. Dahlia Thundering Concept constantly releases A-, B+ material similar to those bands I previously mentioned, maybe with exception to like older August Burns Red and older Breakdown of Sanity. I think it's B+. If you like any of those bands, check this album out. You will like this. The next one is Semantics by Dead Awake. This is a B+ EP from this year. I think it's very metalcore-y. I remember it being kind of generic, but good generic. They do generic quite well. Similar to like a Wage War kind of sound. If you like Wage War, you'll like this. Check it out. This next album is New Rituals by Body Jar. This is an album of a band that used to be pretty big back in the early 2000s. This is like a butt rock band turned like a punk rock band. This album has a shit ton of catchy hooks and catchy choruses, but it's kind of butt rocky in some ways. I think they really carve out their own sound in it. They're not just like another Breaking Benjamin, Pearl Jam kind of sound alike. No Vetter here, baby. I really like this. B+ has the most bulk of all of my ratings, so I'm going to try my best to talk about all of them, but like I said, I'm just not very smart, and I can't remember 200 albums I listened to this year, to the best of my knowledge. I can remember probably half of them, and I'm going to talk about half of them. So this next one's going to be Disposable Life by Knuckle Puck. It's another solid release. If you like their previous material, you'll like this one. I don't necessarily think they deviate away from their sound, yet they do add some interesting elements, such as catchy choruses. One of these songs has a pretty nasty breakdown on it, if I remember correctly, and it just kind of steps itself away from everything else. I really felt like it was solid. Don't think it's their best work, but I don't think it's their worst. B+. This next one is an As It Is album, which goes by the name of I Went to Hell and Back. This is another B plus album. This kind of picks up where as it is left off, but I do think the Great Depression is better. I think they had a guitarist with the long blonde hair. His songwriting elements and whatever he added to the band, I think, is what's missing here. This album has solid songs, and Patty's vocals are just awesome as always. I do think, though, that it lacks that oomph to it that the Great Depression has, or those songs that actually fucking need to say something, like, you know, Boys Don't Cry, or The Great Depression, or those songs. That's basically all I have to say about it, is it lacks that little oomph, but it's solid songwriting in general. The next one is Divided by Villain of the Story. Now, Villain of the Story has always been a sleeper hit from Christian Grey. That's the vocalist. He's always been a very sleeper hit to me. I always thought Christian Grey was a great vocalist. He sounds very similar to Dennis Stoff, previously of Make Me Famous, Down and Dirty, and Asking Alexandria. His screaming is very, very textbook, very solid. I don't know how to explain it. He doesn't really deviate too far. I think all of Villain of the Story is like B+, B- area. This doesn't really fall too far out of it. If you like Dennis Stoff core, this is shit's for you. This next one is Welcome Home by Varsity. Now, this one I kind of have felt a little differently on. I think I might have rated it higher if I had time and more chances to re-listen to it. This is a soul punk kind of album, very along the lines of Happy Hour, The Home Team, things like that. I think Varsity is a solid band with solid songwriting and solid vocal performance. I do think I like their Black EP more, which I gave it A+, its release here. And they just haven't really been able to chase that high I felt with Black. This is a B+ release. Really excited to see what else they do, though. This next one is the self-titled by The Last 10 Seconds of Life, R.I.P. That lineup. I guess they have a different lineup now, which they broke up and now they're back together. I don't fucking know. They're like a divorced couple. This is a deathcore album, and it's very fuck you, if you know what I mean. It follows the line of doing what Body Snatcher does, but not as good as the way Body Snatcher does it. I think this is solid. I don't think it's their best material, but I think it's good. The next one is Love Languages by Wind Waker. Now, this album has a shit ton of hype online. I've seen so many people talk about this like it's the next coming of fucking Jesus. And it's not. I think it's a good album. I think there's a lot of good ideas, good vocal performances from the guy who just left the fucking band. Good screaming, singing balance. There's a lot of interesting moments and big moments that happen on here, but it isn't as it's not consistent. There's a lot of good moments and there's a lot of ones that I find very boring. I also think this album feels very long, whereas I think they maybe could have taken a little bit of a chapter out of some of the other artists who make songs like this similar to them, where they just make the song shorter instead of having that extra chorus, that extra verse. And I think that kind of speaks for itself in some ways. I think that songwriting does make it a little bit more difficult to stay interested for a long period of time. Now we're on to Notions by Notions. This is like a scream rap project. I remember really liking this. If you're a big fan of like City Morgue, maybe mixed with some New School Corpse, where there's a lot more screaming involved, you will like this. This is a B+ record. This next two I'm actually going to do together are old school, new school, old school deathcore. This is bands that really like to sound like early deathcore from fucking MySpace, like Jerome, early Suicide Silence, things like that. This band I think is solid. It's Winter's Remorse, Memoirs of a Broken Mind, and Treading So Ever So Deeply by A Dozen Black Roses. These two are very solid. They came out on the same day, and I felt the same way about both of them after listening to both of them back to back. I can't really say more to it. I don't think it's as good as them. Like, it doesn't capture that same rawness that maybe a band like Tactosa captures, but I think these are solid debut projects from both of these acts. Wish them the best. I'm very excited to see if you're looking for some deathcore, like maybe some smaller deathcore acts on this list. These are guys to keep your eye on. Now we're on to In Stasis by Monuments. Monuments is Andy Cizik's band, one of, I feel like, many of them, or many projects he collaborates with. I think in Stasis captures a lot of great vocal performances and a lot of great riffage. I know Mick Gordon had a part in this, and his parts really shine through. There's a lot of interesting things that goes on in those songs. If you like doom, but maybe with some like singing and screaming high vocals, maybe similar to like Linkin Park, you'll like this. Gemini by Marionette is next. This is another soul punk project similar to Varsity, which I think is a very fresh sound right now. Varsity, Home Team, those kind of sounds. I think it is very good. I don't think it's necessarily the best thing I've heard all year, but I think this is a band that really shows almost like this is a foundational album where they're going to build their future discography off of it, where this is them trying to capture their initial sound maybe. I think it's a very interesting project. Go check it out if anything I've said interests you. Very high-pitched singing over maybe some like trap tones with some bass line. I think it is very solid. B+. This next one's like the complete opposite of that. This one is Ritual Hymns by Worm Shepherd. Worm Shepherd is a blackened deathcore act that literally sounds like a fucking garbage disposal. If you want to hear probably the heaviest band on this entire list, I would go check this out. This shit is so heavy. It is crazy. I do think it does sound similar, but I kind of think when you go into this album, that's kind of what you're expecting a little bit. You're kind of going into this album looking for that same songy, pig squeals, dinosaur noises, like burps, dinosaur burping into the vocals, things like that. You'll find it here. This is B+. This next one is Where Myth Becomes Legend by Rollo Tomassi. Rollo Tomassi is a very progressive new school band, which I think kind of released this album a little early. I think this album is really good, but it does feel a little incomplete. I would actually like them to go back and remix it and remaster it because I think the actual sound is good, but the actual audio engineering is a little poor and mismatched at some points. Great ideas. Really excited. This is probably a top 10 band I'm most excited to see what they're in the future right now. They have a hot sound, hot vocalist. It's great. Great. B+. This next one is From a Bird's Eye View by Corday. This is a rap album along those lines of maybe J. Cole, Kendrick Lamar, that kind of sound where it's a little bit more like clever bar drill rapping, I guess I could say. I'm not 100% sure necessarily how to categorize it. It's just very, very interesting, and I thought this was a pretty cool album. I know a lot of people online didn't like it, but I actually disagree with a lot of them. I think this album kept things very fresh. I think it kept things unique. I think it kept things dedicated to his sound. I think it made a lot of fun stuff happen. This is a solid release, B+. If you like that rap kind of style, I'd check it out. This next one is going to be Erebus by Venom Prison. Venom Prison is a death metal band. I think this is their second album, and this shit is some of the most solid death metal I've ever heard. I gave it a B+ because I do think their vocals kind of aren't the best in regards to listening to in long-term regard. You'll listen to it and you'll be like, wow, those vocals were kind of weird, but after maybe your second or third or fourth song straight of hearing them, you kind of become a little desensitized to it, and they kind of get on your nerves, or at least that's how I felt. I think this is still a very solid project. If I could see people getting past the vocals, I could see people putting this in their album of the year list. A very solid performance instrumentally. You like death metal? You'll like this. Venom Prison, Erebus is a B+. One of the best album arts of the year, too, by the way. And we're on to a one that I actually really like. This is American Wasteland by NASCAR Allo. NASCAR Allo is a punk trap metal artist, which I don't even think captures him really well. He is so different from every other trap metal artist. No one sounds like him. He has a lot more of like a raw punk sound than a lot of these other guys, and I think he really associates his more mentality with punk than trap metal or anything in between. This is a hardcore dude who just makes songs about fucking licking your feet or licking your girlfriend's feet. He does not give a fuck. B+, great rap project. If you like anything I possibly just described, go check him out. Bow, ski, 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 semi-pics of feet. The one after that is going to be Spectre by the band Hereafter. This is a solid metalcore album, very generic, very Wage War sounding, but they do generic quite well. I don't necessarily think if something's generic or sounds similar to something else that it necessarily means it's bad. I think as long as I enjoyed it, it's good. And I enjoy generic metalcore. This is really small band. I'm really excited to see what they do in the future. This is kind of a band I'm keeping my eye on in case they do something really different in the next project, which I think they will. B+, really solid. The one after that is going to be Dystopia by Caliban. Now, this is a sort of like a, I don't even know what to call this, maybe like a wizard metal band. Heavy moments, heavy death metal-like moments, heavy metal moments, and this band has fucking like 2 million albums, so I'd say most of them are like that. I wouldn't say this necessarily deviates that far away, but I liked it more than everything else below it. Fight me. This next one is going to be Fury by Upon a Burning Body. This is an ex-deathcore metalcore band gone kind of generic core. Another generic album. You're going to find a lot of good generic stuff here. I don't think this deviates very far from like the meta sound right now of sounding similar to maybe like Slipknot, Architects kind of thing. I give this a B+. This next one is Remade in Misery by Memphis Mayfire. This is a good comeback album from them. I'm really happy for them. This is pretty solid Memphis Mayfire material. If you like anything that sounds like Challenger, if you like anything off of Challenger, this is basically a fucking Challenger Part 2. Very good breakdowns. Solid going back to heavier metalcore style after 2 horrible albums. Solid comeback album. Don't think it's one of the best of the year, but I think it's one of the best comeback albums of the year. Solid. Like it. Next is Journey by Rivera. This is a Architects core band to the fucking T. But I think their vocals are much better than other bands that do it. Their vocalist is really good. I'd really compare him. I wouldn't say he's as good as Landon from The Plot in You, but he's very similar in his sound of singing and screaming. Really good. I recommend it if you like The Plot in You mixed with Architects. That is perfect. I cannot even word it even better. This next one is going to be Mutilator, period, in parentheses, by Gatherers. Mutilator is a post-hardcore experimental album that has a lot more of an older post-hardcore sound, maybe from like 2003-ish, where it's really solid. I do think I need more time with it to be a little bit higher on this list, but it is so solid. Great songs, great album. I do think this band is very experimental, but I do think their experimentalness necessarily compacts and impacts and affects the actual audio quality you receive at the end product. I think, like I said, solid material. If you like anything I just said, go check this band out. And this next one is Spectre by Stick to Your Guns. I know, 2 fucking Spectres in a row. Stick to Your Guns is a metalcore, more leaning hardcore act with really good groove, really good songs. This album has some butt rock tunes, some metalcore tunes, and some hardcore tunes. There's something here for everybody. It's just another Stuck to Your Guns album that I haven't really ever released anything below, I would say, like a C+, B- area. If you like breakdowns, wanting to swing your arms a little bit in your room, this is the shit, bro. You'll like this. I met some really cool people at their show earlier last year. I think they're a lot of fun. Great act, B+. I'd Rather Be Asleep by Red Handed Denial is a B+ album from this year. Here's why. This is a album that is fronted by Lauren Babick, who is basically just Kellen Quinn who screams and is pretty. And she absolutely kills it. I would say it's pretty similar to all their other material with just, different songs, different writing, different breakdowns, different choruses. I wouldn't say it necessarily deviates too far away from their sound, which is already just pretty generic metalcore, but with female vocalist who sings exceptionally better than a lot of these dudes do. I think, killer performance, great album, B+. Very similar to the next one, which is The Hell We Create by Fit for a King, one of the best album arts of the year, for the record. This is a great album that I think has some generic downfalling moments to it alongside its great standout moments. Great breakdowns. It's very similar to maybe Dark Skies more than The Path. It's like a middle ground between Dark Skies and The Path, which I think is a really good step in the right direction for Fit for a King, especially seeing how awful The Path was. I don't think this is necessarily much better than it, but it is definitely better. No fucking Taco Bell in this album. This is a B+ release. The next one is Violent Intention by Hosticide. This is essentially really experimental trap music, trap metal. Not too much for me to say about it because there's an album later that does basically what this does, but much better. So I'm going to kind of hold off on the review for that for a little while. This is B+ this year. The next one is New Breed by Keizo. This is an album from an EDM artist that features a different vocalist on every song. Very similar to what another band does that I'll be talking about later this year. I think this is a solid album solid tracks, good moments, great picks for who does what sound. I just don't necessarily think I love the dubstep metal kind of thing that's going on. I don't think I necessarily hate it, but I definitely think it's not, the next big thing. Maybe that's somebody else might be doing right now. This is a solid B+ album. This next one is Demonstration by Sun Touch House. This is a hardcore EP with really, really experimental aspects to it that I really like. I think it is a lot of fun, really touching. I think it's very different from everyone else. I think this is a really big sleeper hit for all those nerd lists like Pitchfork or anybody who really puts So Glow's album high. I think this is very, very similar in terms of quality, in my opinion. I think So Glow does outdo it, and I do think I need more time with Sun Touch Houses, but I do think this is very high-quality material from a high-quality artist. This is a B+ release. This next one is Destroy Rebuild by Drugs. This is a really good comeback album 10 years after the previous one, featuring Craig Owens on vocals. This isn't necessarily his best work, but I do think his vocals have improved significantly since the last time we saw him. I definitely can tell he's been writing a lot of these songs in time. Like the song Gold is a really good track. I think there's a lot of fun moments on this. If you like post-hardcore music with Craig Owens fronting it, check this out. You're not going to go wrong. I do think it's not as good as their debut from 10 years ago, but I did not expect it to be. I'm really excited. One of the best band names of all time, Destroy Rebuild Until God Shows, which is Drugs. I think this is solid material. I don't hate it. Don't necessarily think it's the best. Really solid B+. So this next one is from an artist that we have a few albums from him this year. This is, I believe, to be his worst one out of the three. This is WormParty.ogg by Kill Ebola. Kill Ebola is blackened trap metal. So it's very, very fucked up shit. I don't even think I consider this music and just noise at some points, but I do really like it. He has 3 albums this year that he put out, and this is the worst out of the 3. And it's the worst out of the 3, yeah, it's like top 100. That's pretty fucking solid. Nothing sounds like this on the planet, and I don't think anything wants to sound like this on the planet. This is very, very niche nerd music that I'm a nerd for. I like listening to this when I'm like studying. I'm pretty much going to give the review to the 3 different albums right here, but when I go push past the other ones, just know I like them better for what their purpose is. Worm Party OGG by Kill Ebola is a B+ album from this year. This next one is Lonely If You Go by Fall 50 Feet. Very generic metalcore that I liked. I think it has some really good moments, really good choruses, really good riffing. B+ EP, solid. Yeah, check it out if you like anything I just said. Very similar to maybe lines of Hollow Front, that kind of sound. The next one is a beatdown album by the band 156 Silence called Narrative. This is an album that you throw on if you want to beat some fucking ghosts up in your room, maybe crowd kill your lamp, crowd kill your cat, crowd kill your fucking grandma. I don't care. Just go throw some fucking arms. I don't think it's as good as their last album, but I do think it's very solid, very pretty. Vinyl also came with it. I like this band. I'm excited to see what they do in the future. I believe they're on a tour package going to this later this year, which has Drugs on it. And yeah, very solid stuff. Narrative is a B+. The next one is the album Wishful Thinking by Patient 67. Patient 67 is a band that is really familiar in the Twitter space. Their vocalist is kind of a little bit of an influencer in terms of what he has to say a lot of the time. A lot of people respect his opinions on things and kind of things, and his name's Tom Keeley, where he's a very kind person. I think Patient 67 is a pretty solid project. Has really good features in this album. I do think Tom's singing isn't necessarily the best, but I think his screaming is really raw. It's very good. It has a very emotional feel to it that you don't hear with a lot of other generic metalcore that this kind of is similar to. Patient 67 is for you if you're like Sleeping with Sirens with more heavier breakdowns with maybe a little bit more screaming too. The next one is a metal album. I don't even know what really genre to call this. I would call it like maybe older sounding metalcore. This is Learning to Dissolve by Orthodox. If you like bands like Spite, I Am, Varials, things like that, you'll like this band. It does basically what they do. Not necessarily as good as we move to the next album, which is Scars to Remember You by Varials. Varials does basically what that last album does, slightly a little bit better. I think 50 cal on this album is really good. I actually have that in my rotation a lot. I think Varials as a project is getting kind of some pretty good recognition right now too. They're on the Welcome to Rockville lineup, which is really crazy for me. It's really surreal. I think this isn't as good as Pain Again, and it's not as good as Erase Them's debut EP from this year, but this is much better than their last album, which I believe was called Romance. I'm not 100% sure, but it's way better than that album. It's way not better than Pain Again. Sorry, it's a B+. Solid though. I like to see it. This is basically where I expected them to fall. The really high moments are really good on this. The really low moments aren't. Like, I really don't like the Deftones sounding song, but there's a lot of great moments, like I mentioned. B+, 100%. This next album is If You Don't Like the Story, Write Your Own by Whit Lowry. This is an artist who I think has remarkable ideas, yet this year didn't necessarily crush on them. He has a few songs with really good choruses and good samples that he raps upon that really expand the ideas of the sample. I think he has great moments, but also a lot of cringe moments on this album. There's some songs in here that put me to sleep. There's songs I hear that put me in the feels. Some songs in here that make me want to fight. I don't mind it. Don't love it. I think it's solid B+ from him this year. Solid. I'm quite surprised. I thought this was going to be bad because his last album was awful. And so it's kind of nice to see a little bit of a comeback for Whit. Good job, B+. The next one is Bleed the Dream by Foreign Hands. This is an EP that came out, and I was pretty blown away by it when it came out. This is a really good beat-down, new school hardcore project with a lot of metalcore elements to it. I think if you're a fan of See You Space Cowboy, Counterparts, something along those lines, you will like this. This is an EP, B+, great. This next one is Silver Lining by Betraying the Martyrs. Betraying the Martyrs just got a new vocalist who I don't think necessarily is as good as the previous one, but I'll fucking take any new material from this band that I can. The singing on here is especially much better than their previous works, but I don't think the screaming is. The screaming and the songwriting itself is not as good, but I think the singing really elevates it to that next level. That puts it from maybe like a C+ to a B+, which I'll take, man. I don't think the screaming is necessarily as good as their older material, like Out of Egypt, The Hurt, The Divine, The Light, where that's a lot more like MySpace deathcore, and maybe their first album, which has the song Man-Made Disaster on it. That song is remarkable, and I don't think it has some of the good, great moments that their last album has, but I think it's still solid. If you like that kind of little bit heavier butt rocky sound, this will be for you. They have a song called Black Hole on it, which I think is really good. Like I said, I don't think it's any Man-Made Disaster, but I don't think it's necessarily bad. B+. Excited to see what that new vocalist does. Shout out to 1056, by the way. The next one is Dark Bloom by We Came as Romans. We Came as Romans have been around a while, and I think this is a pretty decent comeback album for them. I think this album isn't necessarily the best, but I don't think it's necessarily the worst. This is a really good project where I think it's a pretty important one as well. As you may know, We Came as Romans lost their vocalist a few years ago, and their other screaming vocalist has picked up the duties of singing as well. I do think this album has a lot of range and diversity of ideas, yet does not execute on them perfectly. Really good ideas, they don't necessarily know what to do with them. I do think it's exciting to see that they have a little bit more like moshy songs on here, because I think that's basically what people go to do at their shows now, is mosh, maybe chill out for the softer songs, then go back to moshing. We Came as Romans, solid showing this year, B+. The next one is a sleeper hit. I think this isn't talked about enough. It is the album Shrine from Bleed From Within. If you like older Parkway Drive, this shit is for you, man. This has breakdowns, metal. It's basically older Parkway Drive, just in a new form with new songs. B+, solid release. I think maybe if they had a little bit more variety and a little bit more rawness to their sound, I would like it a little bit more. So the production here kind of hurts them a little bit more than what I would like to say that helps them. I'm really excited to see these guys in February. And yeah, B+. Now, this next album I'm going to talk about is very, very controversial take from me. This is Color Decay by The Devil Wears Prada. I give this a B+ because I actually did not love this album. I think their last EP, the Zombie EP, was phenomenal. And I think all the singles to this album are also phenomenal. They are all A-plus tracks. Watchtower, Sacrifice, Insult, all great. But I do think this album has some weak points. Any song that's not those three, or Cancer, or Hallucinate, I think are a little bit weak. And also their heavier songs just don't hit the same for me as their older stuff does. I don't necessarily know how to explain it. I guess it's a lot of the maturity factor, which I don't necessarily agree with when it comes to metalcore being more mature sounding, making it sound better. I think maybe the cohesiveness of this project may be able to bring it up for me a little bit, but the necessarily songs and album itself doesn't necessarily do it for me this year. I think it's a solid showing, and I think it's good. I don't think it's great. B+, almost rounding off the B+ category. This next one is I Don't Belong Here by Weeping Wound. This is an EP, very experimental, sad, and this is a ex-beatdown project. So this project isn't necessarily as deep beatdown. This is a little bit more sadder beatdown, similar to maybe like Boundaries' new music, but I don't think they're necessarily copying Boundaries. I think they have their own carved out, fleshed out sound that I think they can expand on, and I think the next project is another album that is very similar. This is Porcelain by Orphan, another heavy beatdown project, maybe in the vein of Counterparts mixed with Body Snatcher. Really, really solid stuff on here. Heavy ass fucking breakdowns, really emotional moments. I think this is a really good album this year. I don't think the songs are good enough to make it any higher than almost capping off the B+, but I do think it is great. B+ for Porcelain by Orphan this year. And the last one I'll talk about today is Fear by Stand Atlantic. This is like a desktop TikTok pop punk band. I think it is solid project. I think it's a good release. Fun music. Pity Party is such a banger. Royal and the Serpent features also pretty great. Great songs on here. Great showing for them this year on that Pierce the Veil tour. I think this is a project and an album that came out really well. I think maybe a little more deviation in their sounds may benefit them to maybe breach that A+ album or A- A+ territory that these next acts all do. But I don't necessarily think that it's horrible. I do, however, think that it was a good gatekeeper for A-. I had to really think and put it up against this one to say that it is better than this one to break the next field of albums, which I'll talk about in the next part. Thank you for tuning in. I kind of rambled on a little bit faster than normal because I have a lot more to get through than I actually initially thought. We have about 70 albums still to go. Whew! But this next 70 I have pretty good understanding on because they're the ones I listened to and liked the most from this year. A lot of people, I have a feeling, aren't going to like them. But the A- category is going to be a little bit more of what I liked. Didn't love the absolute most, but I liked and I kept returning to for specific songs and moments on it. And A+ is shit that I could not put down. I listened to it all year long. I listened to it over and over and over and over and over again. So much so that I actually am tired of some of them. I hope you enjoyed. Great year. I'm excited for 2023. Once I'm done with this, I'm going to start reviewing shit as it comes out. I don't really have too much in the January month of the year. I do think that first album I'm going to review is going to be that Tracheotomy album, or it's going to be the August Burns Red or Suicide Silence. Those are like the three off the top of my head that I necessarily remember right now. I hope you have a great day. Enjoy. Thank you for watching. Peace.